All right, hopping in with another video. So this video, where I'm going with this one, and a couple series before this, but especially the video before this, is that most things have a dual side. Most, like light and dark, day and night, cold and hot. Most things are dual. Like, I think that's a lot of what makes reality as we experience it it's unified, but it's also polarized. That is like dual, and something about that polarity, that dual, how something can be dual and unified, that is respective and collective, homogeneous and heterogeneous. A lot of that, I think that's actually how we're able to exist as we are. And but it makes things vital and alive, that polarization. You could say that most of life is possible because of the weather on Earth, the weather patterns. And then that's all you need, the variation of that and the variety of that and the diversity of the weather patterns. And then that's a function of polarity also, because I think that I'm not a meteorologist, but I know that a lot of our life is viable because of the weather is affected by the poles of the Earth. So things have a light and a dark aspect, a beneficial and maybe a detrimental thing. Maybe you could say all people are that. We are beneficial to ourselves and detrimental to ourselves, and we are beneficial to others and detrimental to others. And I think that's a lot of that might not be avoidable. I was talking about the Jaina people in India, as I roughly, loosely and peripherally am aware of them from some things I've read where they have appeared, and they have a real stance about not harming anyone or anything. I think in Sanskrit, himsa means harm, so ahimsa is like non-injury to any being or any person or any being. And if you were to live that out, that is very, very difficult, far more difficult than it can be appreciated on the surface. But it's still noble and commendable and valiant and worthwhile. But a lot of us is like that, is that we still have that potential to harm ourselves and others, even if we're not trying to. I can run my mouth like this and talk on a camera and step on a bug by not paying attention, while I'm talking about not hurting bugs in the video, and that's just an example of that. But also bringing awareness to a process changes that process. It's been appreciated. Some people have wondered, how is it that when scientists, they train their attention on like the dynamics of like subatomic particles, it actually changes the particles themselves. I think that might be appreciated, just if you could appreciate that maybe on a level the scientists are actually the particles themselves, and their attention are also the particles. That's just one standpoint, but it doesn't have to be limited there. That can be true enough, and it can also be different than that, and not that, and all that at once. And that's not, none of that has to be false or true, because nothing has to be anything, but things can be anything, and will be anything, and are anything, and won't be anything, and are not anything. And that's just some of the brilliance of what it is, what we are. And I think that even the word reality might be limiting, because that sounds one, is that something is something, therefore, so for something to be existent, to exist as we appreciate existing, in our concept, it would have to come into existence, exist, and then cease to exist. That's how we appreciate a lot of things. But if it had never existed, yet equally exists for never having existed, that is almost like potential par excellence. Is that how was the universe created? That's partly yours to answer, because it has not been created yet. It can be appreciated that as much as we can appreciate the universe has been created, it could maybe be reason that it has not yet been created until you are now creating it or asking this question. And so thereby you asking that question is part of how the universe had been, or at least is now, and is in relative terms, in absolute terms, now is as present as what had been, and may yet be. So you can say that as you're asking that question, you're actually existing, you're creating what you're asking, how it was created, because it's still yours to define and undefine and half define and redefine and over define and define and not define, as it had been at all points. Even as the sun is shining on my face, so what's between me and the sun? Air and opportunity. But within that air, you could say that's nothing and all things, and it can be anything you want also. But we still need grace though. So, and there's only one sun in the sky at a time. observing the process somewhat changes that process. And so some of these videos, I'm bringing awareness into different things. Like I said, like some of the attitudes in different venues, or like different ways of being aware about things. And I've quoted a book about songwriting, a compendium, a collection of interviews by Paul Zallo, I think, from the late 90s, on songwriting 1 and 2, big tomes of books, very large books. And in there, one person was saying that when you can combine things that seem very distant, very far and apart, there's something of insight there. So I've done these videos about being aware of our environment, awareness to detail, and then I've also made a recent video about some of the contempt and the static that I experience in different venues. One, while I'm working, like at a window while I'm doing deliveries, and then also one at a cafe that a chain cafe that I frequent, but I frequent there as a patron, and also as a deliverer. And I was bantering there in the past, and then a person commended me to put in an application there, and then another person of leadership there all equally didn't appreciate my style of personality as much as another manager appreciated my style of personality. It's kind of interesting. But all I meant to say is that, but when you can see the similarity between things that seem entirely different, you're onto insight, according to that book. So I think that being aware of details help us to be more clever in all aspects, including socializing and bantering and having a good time with people. Awareness does. And then also some of the dynamics of like class and conflict exists in social venues. But so when you combine the inherent conflict or underlying stress because class is stress, because you have a discrepancy of entitlement privilege that is existing. You have a discrepancy of the means of accessing and enjoying what it is to exist, both you and the people you love. That's at hand when you're speaking in terms of class. So there's inherent stress and conflict in friction in class. And then, but we will have class. I think as human beings, I don't think we can get away from class, because all societies have had class. So we need grace in that sense. But you take like a stuffy atmosphere and then being aware to detail, that would seem different, but it can be similar. So I was saying, sometimes we don't actually appreciate what's at play a lot of times, like such as the class dynamics. And it's been said that in the United States that it's a melting pot where you have people of different classes coming together. But I still say it's a very segregated society in terms of class. And even as people are coming together and there's overlapping of class, there's still conflict of class that entire time, because you have dog eat dog, tooth and nail fighting to establish class, sometimes peripherally coming into a venue within like whatever learning or profession or means of livelihood we have achieved outside of a venue informs our class, also where we've come from and the advantages and disadvantages of that. Then in a venue, you have all that at play, but then also we're yet contending again in a venue for our own understanding of our own class, because actually your understanding of class affects your class. I was once in a church venue when I was a young man, and there was a drummer there, a really cool drummer, and a lot of people liked the way that he conducted himself, because he didn't have a lot to say, but he was really good with the drums. And one time in front of the entire congregation, one of the choir leaders, who was also a youth leader in the community, called him out and said, "This is the classiest guy in his generation." So he just put him out in front of all of us in terms of class. And but you could say that person's understanding of his own class would affect his behavior and his demeanor and his conduct, and it's how he's treated, and it yet does amount to class. And he now has a distinction with other people that wasn't entirely economic or professional, or you could say it was skill, like musical, but it was social, and now it's more social. But so our understanding of class affects how we're allowed to think about ourselves, and how we're allowed to think about others, and are allowed to have others think of us. And so that's that contention in different venues. but detail is important. So I'm saying I'm making these videos in the spirit of being aware of different things so that it can work in our favor. But sometimes being aware of something doesn't work in your favor. So that's what I was saying. Sometimes with like compliments is that a compliment can be distracted because now you're thinking about, especially like with the skill, so like oratory or like playing, and so you're thinking about the compliment, and it can somewhat limit your playing. So that's where I was going with that other one, the previous video.